Hi, it's Scott, ROCKFILE, back with another podcast review for you. Let's talk about the brand new 2024 film, Nosferatu. Short version is, this will be one of my favorite movies of the year, easily. One of the top three, easily. I'm a big fan of vampire movies, big fan of Robert Eggers and all the work he's done so far, and he just nailed it. This is probably his most mainstream movie, but that being said, this is a horror movie, and a real horror movie. Like, real horrible stuff happens. It's not the fastest paced movie, but still, you are so enamored and so blown away by how accurate and real and gritty and dark and tangible everything feels. Like you could almost smell the stuff. It's a pretty amazing film, actually. Everybody in it is firing on all cylinders. Whatever the budget's around $50 million, it's all up on the screen. See this in the movie theater. It will not play the same at home. Everything from just the cinematography, the feeling of being in a cold, dark place, some of the voice effects and things like that. Orlok himself, just the sound, unless you got a really great surround sound system at home, you're not going to hear the voice like you're going to hear in a movie theater. For those that don't know, the original Nosferatu was a silent film that kind of changed things, kind of invented the horror film. There had been horror films before that, but it did everything right. Max Schreck, who started that film, there's been movies made about him and everything else that happened. And this is definitely not that. He took, there is a lot out there, and I'm not going to get into it, but Robert Eggers has been involved with Nosferatu pretty much his entire life. He saw the movie as a kid on VHS. He did a school project type play that eventually got made into a real play, and he's been trying to get this movie off the ground for years. It would fall apart, and he would make one of his other movies. If you don't know, he made The Witch, which is one of my favorite horror movies of the 21st century. He made The Lighthouse, which is a surreal, one of the best acting jobs I've ever seen from the two gentlemen starring in it, Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson. And then he directed The Northman, which is a amazing Viking epic. Now, some of these movies are not some people's favorite movies, but you cannot watch them and not say they are extremely well crafted. With The Witch, they built the farm because they wanted it to be a certain way. With The Lighthouse, they built the lighthouse so it'd be a certain way. For The Northman, they actually went to a field where they were going to film a battle scene a year in advance and planted the correct grass so a year later the grass would be at the right height for them to do the battle scene. The dude goes the extra mile to make things accurate, historically accurate, so to speak. He has been called the Gothic horror master, and I think that nails it. With each of his movies, he's taking these horrible or surreal circumstances and taking them back to the real, what they would have been back in the day, with authentic surroundings and accoutrements and clothing and even the way they speak. And for this movie, he really was doing his version. It's not really a remake. It is his version of Nosferatu, kind of what he's had in his head for years. Now, for those who don't know, Nosferatu is basically a ripoff of Dracula. You know, back in the day of early rights and stuff, they couldn't get the Dracula rights, so they made their own kind of thing. And that informs as much of the Dracula legend today as Dracula movies do. Because the Dracula, the book, is a pretty long, pretty flowery affair with just some of what we know as Dracula in it. Go back and read the original book. So what he's crafted here, and looking at it now, just a day later, I saw this on Christmas Day, recording this the next morning. I see what he did there. You know, he's taking it back, distilled it to the basic story. And unpopular opinion, this is going to replace Bram Stoker's Dracula every time for me. Like every time. You have some of the same story beats. You have, you know, the guy the real estate agent dealing with the vampire, who then the vampire invades his life and all that. But this is a much simpler story, a much linear version of the story with more psychological import, more heavy stuff, with amazing cinematography and acting going throughout it. It builds and it builds and it builds, and the end is so worth it. This is art. This is a great movie, a movie that people can enjoy. There are some controversial things in it. I mean, it is a horror movie, and there are some things that people are going to complain about. They're also going to talk about the look of Count Orlok, and we'll talk about that at the end. I don't want to do any spoilers for anybody that doesn't want. This is not what you expect. It's not... it's just not what you expect. After seeing Nosferatu and a whole bunch of other vampire movies, this is not what you expect. Robert Edgers said in a recent interview that he kind of thinks of vampires more like zombies because they're the living dead. They have more powers. They're more seductive, that kind of thing. But basically, they are rotting corpses. And that's kind of what he's done here. Bill Skarsgård disappears into the character. If you didn't tell me it was him, I would have never. And even watching the movie the whole time, I'm waiting to see Bill in this. After seeing it and some of the other movies he's been in, Boy Kills World and such, I thought I could recognize him. No. From his speech patterns to the way he looks, this is not Bill Skarsgård. He disappears into the role. Everybody else is great in the film. Lily Depp, she's freaking amazing in the role. I had not really seen her in much else. I'd heard a lot of talk about her. She's phenomenal. This is a horror movie, kids, a horror movie for adults. This is, I think, what Francis Ford Coppola had in mind when he made Bram Stoker's Dracula. But I think that movie, he was tied too much to he wanted to do things the old way, and I think that kind of handcuffed him. This comes from Robert Edgers' mind. He has distilled this vampire story that we all know through his folk horror sensibilities, his natural instincts to follow real history and real, just down-to-earth grittiness. It feels real from beginning to end, even the more fantastic elements. It's beautifully filmed. The soundtrack is amazing. Go see it in a theater, because this is why we go to the movies. Now, on Christmas Day, I can't say that, something like Sonic 3 would have probably been more palatable. It has some pretty gross scenes in it. It's got some pretty controversial scenes, and it doesn't exactly have the happiest of endings. But this is a horror movie. This is Robert Edgers doing Nosferatu. And as that goes, it's nearly perfect. I really have no complaints about the film. It will wind up as one of my top 3 films of 2024. Just starting to go over that list now. I don't know what else to say without getting into spoilers, so I will talk a little bit about the look. So if you don't want to know anymore, go see the movie. It's playing now. It made $11 million on Christmas Day and a $50 million budget. I think it's going to make its money back without probably this opening weekend. So let's talk a little bit about spoilers in 3, 2, 1. Bill Skarsgård character does not, the Count Orlok character does not look like Max Schreck's version or any other version that we've seen before. As I said in the review, Robert Edgers considers vampires pretty much living dead, zombie kind of things, and he's kind of a zombieized version of Vlad the Impaler. I don't hear anybody talking about this, but that's kind of what he looks like. Pictures of Vlad the Impaler. I think that's what and I'm not going to tell you what he looks like. You need to see the film. But at first, it's a little striking because that's not what you expect this guy to look like with the voice and everything. But now that I've put 2 and 2 together and started thinking about things, yeah, that's what he was going for. This person had become this kind of demon, and he's been alive for centuries, and he's kind of, falling apart, but he's powerful and he's evil and he's pure evil. And I think Bill Skarsgård does an amazing job with the role, and Robert Edgers did an amazing job with the movie. Like I said, I can't give it any higher praise than when I go back to watch something like Bram Stoker's Dracula. I'm going to watch this instead. It's a better version of the story, incredibly well done, affects you, gripping. I found my heart beating fast in certain scenes. It's a good horror movie. It's a real horror movie, and it's rated R for good reason. So don't say, Scott said this was a great movie, I'm going to go see it. It's definitely one of the more horror movies of the year. And rightly so it should be. Nosferatu's playing now. Go check it out if it sounds like your cup of tea. I might get into a spoiler podcast down the road, but I want everybody to see this movie. It just opened yesterday. So no spoilers. Go see Nosferatu. It's definitely worth your time and money. I'm Scott. I'm ROCKFILE. More podcasts on the way. Thanks for listening.